Well, a few weeks ago, I went to a really exotic place for a minister's retreat. It's a place called Andover. Anyone been there? Yeah? It's not worth going back to, really, is it? No. But there is a great church there, and we had a great time together, and we had just a time in a network we're in, the Third Faster Network it's called, and we just had a bit of time, ministers together, chatting together. And there was a bit of time to do some fun things. And it was a lovely day, and I was going to go and sit somewhere green. And on the way out, some of the younger people were on their way to Laser Quest, and they said, "You coming, Simon?" Well, I couldn't resist the challenge, and I said, yeah, I'll go, thinking, what have I let myself in for? But then I thought, well, what can go wrong? You know, they're just a nice, gentle group of church leaders, and, you know, they were all kitted out, and they all looked quite nice and gentle, and I thought, this is going to be a breeze, it's fine. I don't know what to do, but they'll help me. And suddenly, once we got into the zone, they really changed. They became, instead of like gentle ministers, they became malicious murderers. I was getting shot from all angles. They were absolutely ruthless. And then came that moment when it said, "Game over." Now, I wonder if those words have summed up how you feel sometimes. Game over. It's all lost. It's done. Maybe you've come in there feeling like that this morning. Not feeling the joy of Easter. Well, if you have, hold tight, because I've got some good news for you. Now, we're in week 3 of a series called Easter People, what we've been doing in April. And these are stories of cost, courage, and comeback. Because the Easter story is all about people. People who met with Jesus. Some who got it, some who didn't. Some who struggled, some who were restored. All of us in some way like us. People who lived through the cross and the resurrection and were never the same. People with doubts, flaws, and surprises. Well, they were real people. Matt looked at how one of those Easter people, a woman called Mary, who lived in a place called Bethany, honoured Jesus. And we thought about how we need to spend our time, lavish our time on Jesus. And last week it was Palm Sunday, and if you don't know what that is, that's the day we celebrate when Jesus went into Jerusalem and made that triumphal entry. And we witnessed the contrast between the fickle crowd who welcomed him, who were shouting, "Crucify" the next week, and 2 faithful disciples. And we saw that they didn't perform or fake it. They trusted, they followed, even when they didn't fully understand. And they mess up. They mess up in the end, but Jesus seeks them out because they're real people, they're genuine. And fake fades, but real stays. So this is the big question for this week. What do you do when you feel like it's game over? What do you do when everything you hope for disappears? When the story seems to end too soon? When you feel like you've got nothing left to go on? And so many of us have been there or are there at the moment, or maybe there at some point in the future, or maybe you know someone who's there at the moment. Now, if you're not a Jesus follower, you might be wondering what all this resurrection stuff is all about. Why we make such a big deal about it. And I'm not here to pressure you, but I do invite you to explore this with us, because you might just feel that when it's game over, you can hope again. Now, this kind of hope, it could change everything. It could lead you into a living connection with God, a real relationship with him that he came to establish. Now, you might be a Jesus follower and not entering into the joy of all of this morning. You might feel like it's game over in your life for one reason or another. We all get to that place. Yeah, you still believe, you're still showing up, but everything seems to have gone quiet. Your life seems to have gone belly up. You're asking yourself, where is God? Why doesn't he answer my prayers? Now, that doesn't mean you failed. It means you're human. It means you're going through things that normal people go through, that Easter people go through. Even the people closest to Jesus were hit by this at one point. So if that's you, let me encourage you, you're not broken, you're still in the story. So all of us, let's go back to the first time someone dared to move from game over to hope again. And you know what? It didn't come all at once. See, when we celebrate Easter, we think, bam! Jesus rose from the dead and we're all glad and it's wonderful. But actually, when I read through the accounts that were given to us, it was a very gradual thing, and it happened over a process of 40 days. It came like a flicker, small, fragile, like light pushing through the dark. But that was enough. That flicker. That's why we've got the story today. That's why we're celebrating Jesus' resurrection today. That's why he's still changing lives. Now, one of Jesus' early followers, who was called Luke, he was a doctor and he was a bit of a historian as well. And he decided that these events were too important to lose. And so he talked to eyewitnesses on his travels. And he traveled with a Christian leader called Paul and went all over Europe telling people about the good news of Jesus. And he pieced it all together and he wrote it down. So we really know what happened. And we've got something solid to come back to when we think it's game over flashing across the screen of our lives. So come on, let's step into that morning. Let's go into the half-light, to the silence before the city stirs. Let's walk with the women who carried heartbreak in one hand and spices in another. Let's see what they saw. Let's feel what they felt. Let's go to that first flicker when hope began to breathe again. It's early. The grey-blue haze before the sun breaks on the horizon. Shadows stretch long. The air is still and heavy. A group of women walk the quiet path to the tomb. They were the ones who really stuck with Jesus when everyone else but one of the male disciples fled. No one speaks. They're carrying spices, not flowers, but myrrh and aloes to bring honor to the dead. And actually, it was a real act of faith because they'd said in another one of the accounts of Jesus' resurrection, they said, who will move the stone? They didn't know how, but they said, we've got to try, we've got to get there, we've got to do something to honor Jesus because this is so terrible. Just got to prove that it's not quite game over yet. And that was the custom. When someone was dead for 3 days, you would go and anoint the body because the stench of death would come, and then the body would be finally and utterly buried and the tomb closed. It's 3 days since Jesus' brutal execution. So this is their last chance to show him love and to honor him when everything else feels lost. But they're not holding out for a miracle. They're not expecting one. They're walking in what they think is game over. But the tomb is not how they left it. Luke says this. He says, they found that the stone had been rolled away from the entrance. Now, this stone wasn't some loose boulder. It was put there at the front of the tomb by the Romans. They sealed it. And historians say it probably weighed about 2 tons. And it would have taken a team of strong men and permission from the Romans to have moved it. But there it is. Gone. Out of place. And the tomb, wide open. So, they went in. Slowly. Carefully, peering into the shadows, holding their breath. What did they see? Well, they saw stone, they saw cloths, but they didn't find the body of Jesus. And after all, that was what they'd come to find. So, as they stood there, puzzled, these women were standing still, frozen in place. You know what it is when something just really doesn't make sense and you just can't understand what's going on and you think, what is this? What's happening? I mean, it's early morning and they hadn't had their coffee probably by then. You know, Costa's was shut and there's no caffeine shop and they would have wondered what was going on. And they come to honor Jesus, but he wasn't there. The tomb was empty. Maybe it was the early morning light. Maybe they didn't quite see properly and they looked and looked and looked. They were bewildered. They were disorientated. Like someone who just had the rug pulled from under their feet. Now the word Luke uses for puzzled means they were at a loss. It was inexplicable. Where was the body? They just wanted to honor Jesus. And they'd come to honor him, to finish that burial process. And now they can't do it. There's no Jesus, no instructions, no clue what to do next. But suddenly it all changed. 2 men suddenly appeared to them clothed in dazzling robes. Now that flicker of light became a burst. Those 2 men arrived on the scene and lit up that gloomy game over cave. It was like heaven had cracked open and something was shifting because these men were God's heavenly messengers, angels. It's interesting that Luke describes them as men because he wants all the focus to be on Jesus being risen. But it's clear they were messengers from heaven because they lit up the place. And they had quite an effect on the women. The women who were disorientated and dismayed and grieving, suddenly the women were terrified and bowed with their faces to the ground. Wouldn't you be? You go into a gloomy tomb and suddenly it's lit up and you see these heavenly messages. What's going on? Boom, you hit the floor. Dropping to the ground was an instinctive reaction. But hope was breaking through, and it hit them like a jolt. 2 heavenly messengers right there. The air was charged. The whole scene had flipped. Nothing was how it was 5 seconds ago. And then those heavenly messengers asked them a pointed question. I mean, don't you hate it when someone puts you on the spot and asks you a difficult question? And what a question this was. Then the men asked, "Why are you looking among the dead for someone who is alive? What are you doing here in the grave when Jesus has risen?" Huh? Risen? No, hang on. We come to honor the body, hadn't we? Oh, no. Things have changed, they're saying. The question was clear, direct, hard, like truth landing in a room. Why search for life in the place of death? It caught them mid-grief. Their eyes still stinging from tears. Their hearts having been weighed down. Suddenly something had shifted. Hope was breaking in. And they explained exactly what was going on. He isn't here. He's risen from the dead. There it is. That line that changed the narrative. He isn't here. He is risen. Alive. On the move. Doing exactly what he said he'd do. Game over, just got ambushed by hope again. And so they continued to talk to them. Remember what he told you back in Galilee? Remember those days when you traveled with Jesus and the disciples and you listened to him teach and you heard him talk about what was going to happen? Remember what he said he was going to Jerusalem for? Remember he said that the Son of Man, that's a term Jesus used to describe himself, a term he got from the older part of the Bible, that the Son of Man must be betrayed into the hands of sinful men and be crucified, that he'd be given over, that it was to happen, that it was the Father's plan. But here's the kicker. It didn't stop there. Remember, he told you this was going to happen, but he didn't say it was going to stop there. And that he would rise again on the 3rd day. Back in Galilee, which was their base, Jesus' base for going out and telling people about this new thing God was doing, this rule he was going to bring into people's lives. Before the mob broke through, before the disciples ran and fled, before the cross, before the tomb, Jesus told them all of this was coming. Betrayed, crucified, risen. And now, in the quiet shock of that morning, it all started to fall in place. Then they remembered what he said. Yeah, I find that really interesting. Before they actually saw him, they were reminded of his words. Yeah, I'm really glad about that, because we'll read the resurrection accounts and we think, wouldn't it have been great just to have met with Jesus? Wouldn't it have turned our lives upside down? But you see the way Jesus worked it? First of all, they were going to be reminded of his promises. And that puts us right there with them. We've got those same promises. We've got those same words. We've got that same account. They still carry power. They still lead us to Jesus. Jesus said he would rise from the dead. He's risen from the dead. And he's promised that if we come to him, he will give us new life. So, they rushed back from the tomb to tell the 11 disciples and everyone else what had happened. They run straight to the others, hearts pounding, hope rising. They've seen the empty tomb. They've heard the heavenly messengers. And now they've remembered Jesus' words and they've come true. So they take this amazing message back to base, back to where the disciples are hidden in fear of the Jews, in fear of the people who are baying for Jesus' blood and looking for them. Those disciples who thought it was game over, they come with hope again. So they take this amazing hope again message back to base. The first ones to tell the story, the first witnesses of Jesus' resurrection, the first preachers. And they show up with courage, with fire, with resurrection on their lips, bubbling over with joy. But it didn't land. The story sounded like nonsense to these men. so they didn't believe it. I don't know, we can condemn them, can't we? But just put yourself in their place. They've seen Jesus go to the cross. They've seen game over written across the screen of their lives and all they'd hoped for in the future. And it was too much to take in. Too soon, maybe. But someone breaks ranks. And that someone is quite a surprise. It's Peter. This is the guy who boasted that he'd be there for Jesus and fell at the first hurdle. This is the disciple who, when challenged by someone as Jesus was going to the cross, denied he ever knew Jesus and swore about it as well. This is the person who probably was curled up in a corner with regret gnawing at his soul, wondering what he was going to do with the rest of his life. This is the person who thought it was game over, and game over for himself. But when he hears this news, he jumped up and ran to the tomb and looked. You know what it's like when suddenly you hear something, you're all, it's like when you're all lethargic about something and someone brings you the most amazing news and suddenly there's this surge of adrenaline and boom, you're out there, If you want to try and get your teenager out of bed, just tell them there's a parcel with a new PlayStation. You look at them, they're all lethargic at bed. Parcel for you, boom, they're there, And that's the kind of effect it had on him. Something breaks loose in him. He runs, no hesitation, just hope, fueling that dash to the tomb. And then he gets there, stooping. He peered in, looking carefully to see what happened. And he saw the empty linen wrappings that would have been wrapped round the body before. Gone, cast aside. No angels this time, no voice, just cloth and space. But Peter's seen enough to start hoping again. Then he went home, wondering what had happened. That's where resurrection hope begins. And this is what I love about this narrative we have here. It's not suddenly they got it. It's a gradual thing, which may be where you are. A move, a step, a run, a flicker of trust. Game over. Hope again. Because this isn't just their story, it's ours too. Maybe you look around here and you think, everyone seems to have got it together. You're not a Jesus follower. You're interested in what Easter's all about. And you think, I can't have that kind of certainty. I'm not going to enforce that kind of certainty on you. I'm going to invite you, like Peter, to wonder and to think again. Hope isn't for the sorted. It's for the grieving, the disappointed, the ones who aren't sure they believe anymore, the ones who feel it's game over. Real hope rises in real life, in the mess, in the sadness, in the moments when everything feels uncertain, at the times when your life seems to be falling apart. And it starts when you move, when you choose to shift from stuck to searching, from regret to reaching, from it's over to what if it's not? That was the first Easter Sunday. No neat endings here. Just a group of women remembering what Jesus said. Just one man running to check out the tomb and figuring out what had happened. And somehow that's where hope broke through. And that was just the beginning. This is the start of a 40-day journey. Really, what we should do is we should have Easter Sunday services for the next 40 days because Jesus rose over that period to them. He gave them time and space and taught them. He was patient with them so they could take it in. It's a journey of courage, community, pressure, purpose, and breakthrough. And we'll get to part 2 of it next week. But today, here's the invitation. If you think it's game over, hope again. Not because you've got it all together, but because Jesus is alive. And that changes everything. If you're not a Jesus follower, how about taking the next step that brings you from game over to hope again? Now, you could sign up for Alpha. We're really excited about Alpha. That's a great place to explore and to ask questions. You could take a booklet home. I'm just going to ask Yvonne to stand up. There you are, the good-looking lady there. She's got these booklets. We'd love to give you one of those to find out more. Or you could just say, maybe there's more to this than I thought, and I'm going to come back. I'm going to come back next week to find out what part 2 says. You might be surprised to know where hope shows up. And Jesus followers, I invite you to do this. Think about how you can carry that resurrection hope into your week, into the pressure that there is at work, into the classroom or the care home or the kitchen. And think about how you can come alongside someone who feels like it's game over and lead them to hope again. And if you're in that position, where you're a Jesus follower and you feel like it's game over, remember, there's hope again. Look to him. Hold on to that hope. Start wondering. Start asking. Start looking. Game over? Maybe not. Because hope starts with a flicker, a step, a run, a second of trust. You're not out of the story. This could be your beginning. Hope again. Let's pray. Oh, Lord Jesus, we praise you that you are risen. And we thank you that you don't expect us to just suddenly burst into life, but that you're patient and you know sometimes it takes some of us a while to process this. And even those of us who follow you, sometimes we get back into game over mode, the game over mindset. But you say hope again, because I've risen from the dead. And I pray for anyone here who feels like it's game over. May they hold on to that hope. Anyone who is not yet following you, may they take that next step towards hope again and see that flicker on the screen of their life. May we all be resurrection people, people of hope. In the name of Jesus we ask this. Amen.